The world is blind to India's history. Here's why. Well, it's obvious why the world is blind to it, because all credit of scientific nature, of a medical nature, of astrology, I guess that's scientific nature as well. All those things have just been credited to some white person that either discovered it on their own later, way down the road, or they traveled to India, saw it, and then wrote a paper on it. And guess what? They get known for it. That's primarily how it works. Not only that is the reason why is because a lot of people, a lot of the gold, a lot of the statue, a lot of the history was in gold. Gold, silver was in what's that kind of material called? I don't know, a profitable material. So a lot of the history of India has sadly been melted down into blocks. Was melted down into blocks. It just because someone was trying to make a profit. So that's a huge part of it. That is a massive part of it.
What if I told you that we only know a mere 0.5% of India's
But thank you for letting me know.
That's right. This tiny little square represents everything we know. 1.6 million artifacts registered and documented. The rest, that's everything we should know but don't have access to. An estimated 300 million artifacts in total, according to independent heritage experts. But what happened to all of this? The private market for artifacts happened. $million-dollar auctions and money laundering, illegal digs and smugglers, and corrupt temple-robbing scholars. Yes, greed has destroyed our record of India's history.
Welcome to the party.
1 million 9 up front, 2 million, 30 million.
Entire libraries of ancient literature and inscriptions. Entire galleries of statues, paintings, and weapons. The best of the best that India has to offer, sanitized and sold to the highest bidder. Here's the crux of the problem. The private market for artifacts deletes historical data from the public record.
The archaeological record is being systematically destroyed.
The common argument used by insiders to defend the private market is that buyers are excellent custodians of history, but only a tiny percentage of collections are accessible to outsiders.
And that means that our hope of really understanding the human past is being undermined.
Bear in mind that only the most marketable artifacts even make it to the auction block. This gorgeous piece sold for $6.6 million. This piece sold for $2 million. And this piece sold for $800,000. This one made it to auction too, but sold for a mere $7,500. It depicts an unknown Gandharan water deity, as well as the ancient architecture of the Swat Valley, and yet it is not available for academic investigation. Items like this could be crucial to building our understanding of Indian history, if only we had access. Just imagine what we don't know about the Indus civilization simply because so many artifacts are inaccessible. Because for every artifact that actually makes it to auction, around 30 to 50 artifacts are rotting away at some dealer's storage facility. And if that isn't bad enough, countless more artifacts are illegally excavated to supply these facilities. Look at that green square. It represents the entire sum of knowledge accessible to the collections of private custodians. And this is the sea of ignorance, representing millions and millions of hidden artifacts, either locked in someone's inaccessible collection or in middleman storage. But there's no database of artifacts so that academics can request access. And so the vast majority of artifacts on the private market remain invisible to the world. Forget about custodianship, because a system that buries 100 artifacts to save one is destructive to the historical record. The statistical reality is that we could solve major historical mysteries right now. We could fill massive gaps in the historical record right now, if only there wasn't a private market for history. Don't believe me? Meet Kanishka, leader of the Kushan Empire and arguably one of the most important kings in Indian history, but only known to the public as a headless stump of a statue. For decades, academics spent time, energy, and resources
because someone had the head. Someone had found the head and had taken it. Like a lot of this stuff has happened, like especially with wars as well. So many people felt inclined to just take what they wanted. Like in World War II, after Japan had basically given up after the 2 nukes were dropped. They had given up, and they were, we basically declared martial law at the time. They were not allowed to wield their ancestral blades anymore. That a few of the most historically made by like greatest, like some of Japan's greatest blacksmiths are in some U.S. soldiers' hands, not knowing it's there, because and if they were ever to take it to Japan to get it like evaluated, if it's the sword, they're never receiving it. They're never getting it in return. So a lot of it just ups and disappears because of things. A lot of people don't understand. In America, had no concept of what an actual samurai sword meant to a family. They had no concept of it. They just thought it was an object of war. It wasn't until it was explained to the US government that it was more like a family's lineage, that it was had more of a symbol to it than that, before they stopped it. Because it's like one of the greatest ancestral blades literally was given up like an hour before they told the public, do not give your blades to the US. They have that you're allowed to keep them since they're an ancestral piece. Yet they are not an act of war, a blade of war. It's something of history. But yeah, like one of the few of the greatest. Like you can look it up online where they have like like some of the sketches of their pattern and everything aren't even available to the public, just in case it returns back to Japan. They can see if it's actually there. The thing is, if it's here in the West, it was probably sold as some menial toy that now probably sits on some random person's shelf or has ended up gotten lost somewhere and rusting. That's the sad part. That's the sad part, that it's completely been destroyed. But that tends to happen where people travel somewhere not thinking much of it because they have no concept of history, have no concept of that kind of thing, that they're like, oh, I'll take it.
Sources speculating on his appearance and what it might say about Kashan culture and the dynamics of power. Then, in 2021, an item that a private buyer once had tucked away in a vault was finally revealed to the world. A fully formed, unbroken statue of Kanishka, face and all, with a Saka inscription identifying him. But scholars still don't have proper access to the statue, so they can't actually verify anything for the historical record. Could it be that the dealer was just trying to pump up the value of their asset? We may never know. So much of the conversation about the private market for artifacts focuses on illegal smuggling. The ugly truth? Smuggling is an integral part of the legal artifact pipeline. Buyers and sellers are fully aware of the system in which they participate. This is Norton Simon, canned food magnate and legendary art and artifact collector. In fact, he was so famous that he even graced the cover of Time magazine. Entire documentaries were made about him. Simply put, Simon knew exactly how the system worked. Regarding the Chola-era Shivapuram Nataraja, he told a Times of London reporter, "Hell yes, it was smuggled. I spent between $15 million and $16 million last year on Asian art, and most of it was smuggled." But buyers and sellers like Simon aren't the only problem. Corrupt academics grease the wheels of the machine. This is the scholar Mary Slusser, an absolute titan of Himalayan art history. She was posthumously exposed in 2023 for her role in the illicit trade of Nepali and Indian antiquities. Slusser would photograph valuable artifacts at temples, then, coincidentally, those same artifacts would be stolen and appear in the hands of big-time dealers. Slusser would then write articles about the stolen artifacts in trade journals like Orientations and Arts of Asia. Her articles would list the items as being from a private collection, deliberately omitting her own photographic evidence that the artifacts were in a temple just a few years prior. This allowed the items to be possessed by major institutions in the West, like the Sackler Gallery and the Rubin. Check this out. Regarding a stolen Himalayan artifact.
I have a question. There were white people like you in theater, or just Indian? It was just Indians. Just Indians. Yeah, I was the only white person. I was the only pasty person there. I stood out. I stood out by a mile. A huge treasure was found in Padmabha Swami Temple in Kerala, worth $2 to $3 US, but still door B not opened yet. I mean, again, a lot of stuff is always, worth $2 to $3 trillion US, and Vault B is not opened yet. Well, that's the thing. It's like a lot of that stuff should be protected. A lot of that stuff should be given back. Like even the Kidur, gem, Kuhidur, close enough. It should be returned. Like I truly believe, like eventually, like slowly people, the private sellers, not so much. But the nations that have stolen from nations, over time, they do return what has been stolen. It's just like, oh, why the heck do we have this in one of our museums? It's Egyptian art. Let's return it to Egypt. And then after that, it starts getting crated around and displayed in other museums around the world. And I think that's what's best, is where museums operate as a window into nations, a window to a world's history, to where you can go to a museum one day, see the girl with the pearl earring. Go to a museum a month later, they have the Mona Lisa there. I mean, it would just constantly go around so that the world can see it all. That's truly what I think would be best. So the world actually has access to those things.
Slusser discussed options for getting around the law with Elizabeth Knight, who was the editor of Orientations magazine and also a renowned scholar of Asian art. It could be published as just private collection. People will think it belongs to me. There's total silence regarding exact provenance. Except for you and me, I don't believe there is a soul in the world who would recognize where it came from. Again, these are scholars, the sort that will wax poetic about India on a book tour or at a speaking engagement, all while helping sell its history behind closed doors. Speaking of behind closed doors, Slusser explained, once a dealer trusts you, Western buyers get taken to shadowy backrooms with the good stuff that was hidden away from the general public. She even acknowledged that it would be theoretically illegal to export whatever items were purchased. Slusser further explained that these dealers make special house calls to trusted Westerners to showcase new items they've procured. During these house calls, she purchased these and other antique paintings from a shady dealer in Nepal, known only as Mr. T. Never mind the fact that all of this was done in secret precisely because the artifacts were illegally sourced. And check out the shameless admission in a puff piece published on the Rubin Museum's own website. Note that the artifact was still smeared with fresh food residue and recently made ritual markings, indicating that it had very likely been illegally removed from an active shrine. But how does an illicit artifact actually make it to auction or to a museum? Artifact auctions have to at least maintain the illusion of legality. Well, the artifact has to be cleaned before it can go to auction. Yes, a middleman can acid wash the artifact to make its source untraceable, but that alone won't remove the stain of illegality. Whitewashing an illicit artifact requires serious legitimacy infrastructure. We're talking shell companies, provenance forging, scholarly blurbs, and more. As one might expect, this requires a great deal of coordination. Consider the decades-long collaboration between museum research consultant Emma Bunker and British antiquities dealer Douglas Latchford, whose illicit artifact network helped the Khmer Rouge secure the funding necessary for their genocide. Fun fact, Latchford and billionaire buyer Leon Black are both mentioned in the Epstein files. Specifically, the files talk about Latchford's sale of smuggled antiquities to Mr. Black.
Of course
Latchford
they were.
smuggled countless 10th century Khmer and Indian artifacts out of major sites like Kokur. To be sold at a high price in the West, these artifacts now had to be cleaned and legitimized. So Bunker authored high-end coffee table books such as Adoration and Glory. By referencing and including the stolen items in these books, Bunker provided the artifacts with a publication history. And when selling the artifacts at auction, Sotheby's and other auction houses cited the book as proof of the item's legitimacy and provenance. The auction houses were fully aware of the illicit nature of these artifacts. In an email sent from Bunker to Sotheby's officials, the Cambodians now have clear evidence that it was definitely stolen from Kokur. Bunker and Sotheby's also discussed strategies for circumventing the law and avoiding public backlash, which included the possibility of holding a closed auction as opposed to an open auction so that nobody would ever find out about the crime. Side note, Sotheby's hired a scientist to make a false conclusion that the statue's damage was caused in ancient times and not due to smuggling. But the scientist actually concluded that the statue was likely broken and then smuggled. He was terminated as a result, and a friendlier scientist was hired as his replacement. Court documents reveal that Sotheby's executives not only considered the risk of bad press, but had outlined specific ways to respond to outside criticism. The price and importance of the item for their New York Asia Week event made it worth the risk. So yes, these auction houses are hands-on involved in the illegal artifact pipeline. No matter how many glitzy events they throw for millionaires and billionaires, no matter how many celebrity historians and legendary collectors they invite to promote their services,
the combination of gilt bronze and silver, the way the jewelry is done with all these turquoise stones, this is just in a class of its own.
It's important that we don't lose sight of the ugly reality. Meet Vaman Ghiya, the mastermind.
Like, there's so much corruption that goes to that, and it's you want to respect some people, but eventually you start learning about their history, and you're just like, maybe they didn't deserve the praise they were given. I mean, look at Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi. You have all these characters that were praised, like all these historians that are supposed to be doing the world a favor by getting knowledge of the world, only to be lining their own pockets by adding to the corruption. Treasures found. $20 billion. So 2 trillion rupee. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah, they're just absolutely corrupt. They have no morals, and of course they're on the files. Of course they're on the files. Why would they care about anything if they have no set of morals to begin with? That's the problem. Is like the world's been getting further and further away of having like a moral compass.
Behind the theft of tens of thousands of valuable Indian artifacts. Ghiya possessed entire warehouses full of these artifacts, many of them illegally pried from temples and other ruin sites. Here's the thing. Ghiya was a favorite dealer of Sotheby's and Christie's for decades. In fact, representatives from Sotheby's London regularly traveled to India to meet with Ghiya and procure artifacts from his warehouses. These Sotheby's specialists were tasked with evaluating the stolen artifacts to determine which would fetch the highest prices at auction in the West. Switzerland was the cleaning house. Once Sotheby's representatives identified that an artifact was particularly valuable, Ghiya then laundered its provenance using a combination of Swiss shell companies, fraudulent papers on yellowed pages, and Geneva freeports. At auction, this allowed Sotheby's to claim that the artifacts were sourced from legitimate Swiss companies rather than from a shady dealer in India. But Sotheby's was aware of the truth because their very own representatives were the ones visiting Ghiya and pre-selecting the artifacts that were later auctioned. Sotheby's was also aware that their wrongdoing had to be covered up. Internal memos show that they knew their visits with Ghiya would be monitored by Indian authorities, and so Sotheby's suggested that its representatives come up with false pretenses for the visits. Criminal misconduct was core to the job. Felicity Nicholson, then director of antiquities at Sotheby's, even admitted that she found the shady side of the business to be rather pleasant. And Christie's, well, they allegedly continued to talk shop with Ghiya as late as January 2003, while he was being actively investigated for illegal smuggling. There's simply no accountability. Every major player in the industry is aware of what's going on. Take a look at what Thomas Hoving, director of the Met, had to say about the Indian artifact pipeline. Loose enforcement and loose morals have made for a thriving antiquities market, one in which there's a revolving door process between academia and the commercial artifact world. First, you do the rounds in a public institution. Then you make bank off artifact sales. Take Dr. Amin Jaffer, historian and social media darling, based in the UK. Jaffer spent 12 years as a senior curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. He was the primary academic voice behind the museum's Indian exhibitions, and he authored definitive books on Indo-European decor. Then he moved to Christie's. In a remarkably candid interview, Jaffer admitted that one of his primary motivations for moving to Christie's was to monetize my Rolodex. This Rolodex is the vast network of high net worth buyers he cultivated while working at a public institution. Jaffer now also serves as a curator for the private Altani collection.
So he's literally betraying his own. Like, that's the thing. It's just like so many people will sell their souls for money. For money. And that is so sad that we live in such a monetary world where people are willing to monetize their own ethics, their own morals, just for money. That is so barbaric, so self-centering, so disgusting. But the people feel guilt-free about it because it's just like, well, if I'm not doing it, this is the mindset. Well, if I'm not doing it, somebody else will. That's the mindset. That's what gets them to feel okay about it because, well, they're not going to do it. Somebody else will.
Whose Indian artifacts regularly set records at Christie's auctions. Now that is monetizing your Rolodex effectively. Remember, this is legal, and what little regulation does exist is barely enforced. According to a 2013 government report, the Archaeological Survey of India has never once attempted to investigate or collect information on any of the Indian antiquities put on sale at Sotheby's and Christie's. Their excuse? No clear legal provision commanded them to do so. Look, Indian history is being sold at an alarming rate, and some of your favorite historians are actively promoting this private market by lending their legitimacy and reputation to various auctions and artifacts. Here's what best-selling historian William Dalrymple wrote in his book, The Anarchy. By his own estimates, a single private collection in the Welsh countryside had more Mughal artifacts than any single place in India, the National Museum of New Delhi included. And yet, despite acknowledging the sheer disproportionality of it all, here he is shilling for auctions of valuable items from Indian history, helping to facilitate an even deeper knowledge and access gap.
So a lot of these pictures we're seeing for the first time. Astonishing collection. There is no better collection anywhere in the world.
These remarkable spectacles come from the High Mughal period. They are an extraordinary and unique piece of history. The bedchamber sword is one of the most magnificent weapons to survive from 18th century India. It not only has a perfect provenance, it's not only a perfect weapon in a perfect state of preservation, but it's also an object of extraordinary beauty. This is one of the finest swords ever to come on the market.
Astonishing, extraordinary, perfect, perfect, perfect. That's what he's being paid to do, hype up the sale and promote the legitimacy of the artifact. Dalrymple has also written for Bonham's Magazine and other publications whose sole purpose is to promote artifact sales. Oh, surprise, surprise. Bonham's used his articles to directly promote the sale of relevant artifacts.
And he gets
and
a
here's
cut.
the eminent George Michel helping legitimize sandstone jollies that have no clear provenance. In fact, he routinely writes blurbs in auction catalogs. These don't contribute to the corpus of knowledge as there's no peer review. It is purely a marketing effort. Michel co-founded the Deccan Heritage Foundation, who actively participates in the promotion of auctions, such as at the Asia Week event in New York.
All these places these foundations, these charities, that there's always some kind of corruption behind them. It is sad. It is sad. There are very few that are actually doing what they say they're going to do. The majority of them are all fraudulent. They're all ways of laundering money. They're all ways of lining their own pocket.
The other co-founder, Stéphane Bloch-Chalos, was previously chairman at Christie's Italia, and he even held leadership positions at high-powered Geneva banks. These connections run deep. For example, Christie's London hosted the launch of the Deccan Heritage Foundation's book on the architecture of the Deccan. And if you're not aware, the DHF actively supervises key sites across India. Now that you know their conflicts of interest, do you trust them with historical stewardship? This is popular art historian Ursula Weeks, and here she is helping to legitimize a Sotheby's auction of Indian arms and armor. And here she is celebrating the high sale price of an Indian painting at Ida Nordman. She even made a fun little reel to celebrate a record-setting Christie's auction.
Sold with you, 8.5 million.
But why would brilliant historians, people who claim to love Indian history, shill for a market that actively obscures it? First, consulting fees. Big, juicy consulting fees. After all, these historians are critical for building confidence in an artifact's value and its perfect provenance. Second, if they want to access the really good stuff, the unseen paintings, the unpublished manuscripts, they have to play nice with the people who own it. If they ask too many questions about where that Chola bronze actually came from, funding and access disappears. Okay, just a quick interruption. At Odd Compass, we've been hard at work building Rakshasa, a dark fantasy RPG set in urban India. Curious? Here's our updated gameplay trailer.
I saw this. I hope they change the gameplay style. I really do. The gameplay style is very basic. Like, the combat system is very basic. Throwing snakes.
If the vast majority of private buyers don't actually care about preservation or about contributing to our shared public understanding of history, then why is there such a massive market for antiquities? Well, it just so happens that artifacts make an excellent investment vehicle. By strategically buying and selling antiquities, one can artificially pump value, launder money, evade taxes, and more. Here's how it works. Once an artifact is purchased at auction, it typically remains where the previous buyer kept it, in a tax-exempt freeport, a high-end, climate-controlled warehouse designed to store valuable art and antiquities. These freeports are often located in Luxembourg, Switzerland, UAE, and Hong Kong. After some years, a friendly appraiser is brought in to pump up the value of the artifact before it goes back to auction. The value increase can be justified due to a number of factors. It was briefly loaned to a museum, for example, or it was referenced in articles or books or blurbs in magazines like Arts of Asia. Or perhaps there's newfound market interest in the origin country's history. At auction, the artifact sells at a significantly higher price thanks to the appraisal, and thus millions and millions of dollars are quietly pumped and dumped. For those who want to go totally tax-free, the artifact can be donated for a massive tax write-off instead. Because of the subjective nature of appraisal, and because assets change hands without having to go through customs, and because the sale was anonymous, there's a completely untraceable paper trail. It's a perfect setup for money laundering. Who benefits? Well, extremist groups for one. Did you know that the second highest income generator for ISIS, after oil, was the antiquities trade? In fact, heritage experts estimate that ISIS was generating hundreds of millions of dollars per year through the private artifact pipeline. And you might recall that, in 2001, the Taliban destroyed the timeless Bamiyan Buddhas of Afghanistan. But did you know that immediately after the site's destruction, they looted the remaining artifacts and smuggled them out of Afghanistan so that they could be sold on the private market? Look, there's no such thing as an innocent buyer, because none of this happens without a buyer. Remember, many of those involved aren't obvious villains. They're charming aficionados, scholars even. Their illicit activities are covered up by a thick layer of sophistication. Those who feel bad about their role in the unethical artifact trade engage in all sorts of strange mental gymnastics. Douglas Latchford even had the audacity to make a reincarnation argument. In a 2012 interview, he stated, "Buddhist priests told me I was Khmer in a previous life, and that what I collect had once belonged to me." Artifacts whose illicit nature is extremely obvious are exchanged through a private sale, a unique service offered by the various auction houses. Take a look at Bonham's service page. It's interesting how the discreet and confidential nature of the transaction is so important to the service, don't you think? But even the artifacts that go to public auction have questionable provenance, more often than not. There are two regulations that auction houses have to be careful about: the 1970 UNESCO Convention and the 1995 UNIDROIT Convention. So what you'll find is that many Asian artifacts listed at auction have a fraudulent or otherwise questionable provenance that's listed as 1970 or earlier, or 1995 or earlier. This is in order to circumvent these international regulations. This one even has a publication history that involves a scholar getting an invite to publish excerpts of select collector items to pump up the value. Confused? Think of it like a teenager trying to purchase alcohol with a fake ID. They have to falsify their date of birth on the ID so that they are at least 21 or older. Similarly, artifact dealers falsify an artifact's provenance to make it seem like it was acquired before 1970 or 1995, depending on the jurisdiction. So, next time you're wondering why the details of Indian and Asian history are so sparse, you might want to consider how much of it is sold in hyped up auctions.
Yeah, that's just, oh, that's depressing. That's really depressing. Old Compass really gave me a downer with that one. Holy crap. Because that's the thing. It's like, I like to think that that stuff is no longer a thing, but this world is so small. It's just going to continue happening. That stuff just continues to happen. Everyone's just trying to get a one-up, and they use that mindset. If it's not me, it'll be someone else. So they're willing to do it just so that they can line their own pocket. Instead of having to worry about the future, instead of having someone else get that money, they can do it, and they can at least see the stuff. I don't know. I don't know what goes into those kinds of mindsets. I've never understood it. I've never understood it. I mean, I'm the type of person that can't even hold a job if I'm having to be like a scummy salesman to sell someone a lie. I hate that kind of stuff. I hate that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic that people are always in it for themselves. People are always in it for themselves. And it just ruins everything. It ruins everything for everyone. It does. Those people who are wanting to learn their own history, all of India is completely getting screwed over continuously. And the fact that it's being aided along. But I'm lucky enough to be in a nation that has no history except for what was created, and all the history that is here is from the Native Americans, and that stuff has constantly been preserved. There's no background deals. There's no people stealing stuff and selling it on the black market. There's none of that stuff. Well, there probably is a small minority of it, but India's constantly having its own people harvest its own culture and sell it because, oh, this is ancient history. It doesn't matter. But history does matter. Like, that's the thing. You will never truly know what history was because of situations like this. Because nobody, a lot of that stuff just ups and disappears. A lot of the gold, a lot of the bronze, a lot of the stuff that had value back in the day was probably just melted down by people thinking it would be worth more melted down. It's tragic. It's absolutely tragic just seeing that kind of stuff. And like the fact that kind of stuff is encouraged. It's absolutely encouraged, and people will always have the mindset, well, if I don't do it, someone else will. It's the same kind of thing like with littering, the mindset of littering. It's just like, well, everyone does it, so if I stop, it's not going to do anything. And it's the same kind of thing. It's not about other people. It's about you. It's always about you. And if more people thought of it that way, where it's about my own morality, it's about my own ethics, the world would be a much different place. The world would be a phenomenally different place.
You guys got a video? What's so bad?
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Wait on that.